Shimmy, shimmy, cocoa bop, shimmy, shimmy, rock, shimmy, shimmy, cocoa bop, shimmy, shimmy, rock. I met a girlfriend, a Trisket. She said a Trisket, a biscuit, ice cream, soda, pop, vanilla on the top. Ooh, Shalita, walking down the street 10 times a week. I met it, I said it, I stole my mama's credit. I'm cool, I'm hot, sock you in the stomach 3 more times.
When we think of iconic and well-loved recognizable faces in Hollywood, Tom Hanks will undoubtedly pop up in a lot of people's minds. After all, with multiple Academy Awards, a filmography that has grossed over $4.9 billion in North America and more than $9.96 billion worldwide, Hanks has certainly had a career that most actors or people in general could just ever dream of. Also, Hanks being the go-to actor for some of my favorite directors such as Steven Spielberg or Robert Zemeckis. Looking back at him and his career felt like a natural thing to do. With that being said, Tom Hanks has over 93 credits on IMDb, so looking back at every movie of his would take way too long. This is why for this video we'll focus on his humble beginnings and look at the projects that most touched me personally throughout my life. So without any further ado, who is Tom Hanks? Thomas Jeffrey Hanks was born in Concord, California on July 9, 1956. In his childhood, Hanks' family moved often. By the age of 10, he had lived in 10 different houses. In school, he wasn't very popular with students and teachers alike. Basically, well, he was a geek, and painfully, terribly shy. Even so, Hanks did start acting at a young age and acted in school plays including South Pacific while attending Skyline High School in Oakland, California. In college, Hanks studied theater at Chabot College in Hayward, California and transferred to California State University, Sacramento after 2 years. In 1979, Hanks moved to New York City where he made his film debut in the low-budget slasher film He Knows You're Alone and landed a starring role in the television movie Mazes and Monsters. Both of these projects didn't do too well, but it was at least an initial attempt at getting his foot through the door. It was the following year in 1980 where he actually got his first noticeable role in the ABC television show Bosom Buddies. Once he booked the show, he moved back to Los Angeles. In this sitcom, Tom Hanks and Peter Scolari play a pair of young advertising men forced to dress as women so they can live in an inexpensive all-female hotel. Bosom Buddies ran for 2 seasons, and although the ratings were never strong, television critics gave the program high marks. Being on a network show gave Hanks the opportunity to have a few guest starring roles on other sitcoms such as Family Ties, where he made 3 guest appearances as Elise Keaton's alcoholic brother, Ned Donnelly. I did want to mention that guest star appearance role because, well, Family Ties was one of my favorite shows growing up, featuring my all-time favorite actor, Michael J. Fox. Even though he did amazing on Family Ties, his other guest appearance on the 1982 episode of Happy Days, in which he played a disgruntled former classmate of Fonzie, was actually the real jumpstart to his cinema acting career. During the filming of Happy Days, he met director Ron Howard, who called him soon after to play in the movie Splash. At first, Howard considered Hanks for the role of the main character's wisecracking brother, a role that eventually went to John Candy. Instead, Hanks landed the lead role in Splash, which went on to become a surprise box office hit, grossing more than $69 million. This movie follows the story of Alan Bauer, who took a boat ride to Cape Cod with his parents in 1964. During the boat trip, he gets fascinated by something below the surface of the water and jumps overboard. In the ocean, he sees a young girl and inexplicably finds himself able to breathe underwater. However, Alan is rescued and pulled back to the surface. 20 years later, Alan is the co-owner of a wholesale fruit and vegetable business in New York City. Through the years, Alan's relationships have failed as he subconsciously seeks the connection he felt with his mysterious girl. Depressed after his latest breakup, Alan returns to Cape Cod where he encounters eccentric scientist Dr. Walter Kornbluth on a diving expedition. When his motorboat malfunctions, Alan falls into the sea and is knocked unconscious. His wallet drops onto the coral below. He wakes up on a beach, in the presence of a beautiful naked woman who is unable to talk. After kissing him, she dives into the sea where she transforms into a mermaid. She finds the wallet back and using a map from a sunken ship, the mermaid decides to search for Alan in New York City, sprouting legs when her tail dries. On finding Alan, they fall in love, but she has a secret, which will no longer be a secret if she gets her legs wet. Since that movie was such a huge success, Hanks started booking many other films throughout the 80s, such as Bachelor Party, The Man with One Red Shoe, and Volunteers. but the movie that touched me most after his first box office hit was The Money Pit, which was released in 1986 and follows the story of young lovers Walter, played by Tom Hanks, and Anna, played by Shelley Long, who are house-sitting a New York City apartment owned by Max, Anna's ex-husband, who suddenly moves back to New York City and decides to toss them out. Needing a new home, they settle on buying a country estate outside the city, which is available for a suspiciously low price. It soon becomes apparent why, as doors fall off their hinges, staircases come tumbling down, and the bathtub falls through the floor. The couple's relationship suffers similarly. The film received mixed reviews at the time, but for some reason, even though the story is pretty simple and some of the gags, well, they're downright, well, telegraphed, for some reason, this movie just keeps me on my toes and just entertains me and makes me want to rewatch it every couple of years. In 1988, Tom Hanks made the movie Big, which for me is probably the most influential film I saw of him during the 80s decade. After all, when the movie came out, I was 7 years old, so I could definitely relate to a child wishing to become an adult. The magical story of the film follows a 12-year-old named Josh Baskin, who after making a wish to become an adult, turns into a 30-year-old man played by Tom Hanks. Not being able to stay in his childhood home, he heads to New York City and gets a low-level job at Macmillan Toy Company. A chance encounter at a toy store with the owner of the company leads to a promotion testing new toys. Soon a fellow employee, Suzanne Lawrence, takes a romantic interest in Josh. However, the pressure of living as an adult begins to overwhelm him, and he longs to return to his simple, former life as a boy. The film was met with critical acclaim at the time and was nominated for many awards. On a fun note about the fictional Zoltar Speaks fortune-telling machine portrayed in the film, it was actually modeled after the real-life 1960s machine Zoltan, the name differing by one letter. What's funny is that living in America, I've actually come across these machines on multiple occasions, proving in some way how movies can influence the real world. I doubt these machines would have remained popular if the movie Big hadn't come out. This movie also established Hanks as a major Hollywood talent, both as a box office draw and within the industry as an actor. For his performance in the film, Hanks earned his first nomination for the Academy Awards for Best Actor. In 1989, Hanks made a smaller budget movie called The Burbs, written by Dana Olson, who based experiences from his own childhood. Hanks accepted the role of Ray with enthusiasm, stating that what's so bizarrely interesting about this black psycho comedy is that the stuff that goes on in real life in a regular neighborhood will make your hair stand up on the back of your neck. He was also intrigued by his character. Here's a guy with a great life, a nice house, a wife, a beautiful tree, a nice neighborhood, and he's happy. Next day, he hates it all. As the movie title says it, The Burbs is set in a typical American suburb. This movie tells the story of Ray Peterson, who is settling in for some time off in his suburban home. Unfortunately, his time off turns to horror when the Klopeks, a suspiciously odd family, move in down the block. Enlisting the aid of his paranoid buddy Art and his militiaman neighbor Rumsfeld, he investigates the Klopeks. When a neighbor disappears, Ray and his cohorts risk their lives to save their cul-de-sac from the clutches of evil. This movie, along with other films such as Joe vs. the Volcano and The Bonfire of the Vanities, weren't huge box office successes, even though I did enjoy them a lot as a kid. The only real financial success of the late 80s and early 90s was Turner and Hooch. What actually started his climb back to the top was his portrayal of a washed-up baseball legend turned manager in A League of Their Own in 1992. Hanks said in an interview that his acting in early roles was not great, but that he subsequently improved. My work has become less pretentiously fake and over the top. Tom Hanks' real modern era began in 1993 with the romantic drama Sleepless in Seattle. The film follows Sam Baldwin, played by Tom Hanks, who moves to Seattle with his son after the death of his wife. When Jonah calls into a talk radio program to find a new wife for his father, Sam grudgingly gets on the line to discuss his feelings. Annie Reed, played by Meg Ryan, reporter in Baltimore, hears Sam speak and falls for him, even though she is engaged. Sleepless in Seattle was released to critical acclaim and was a commercial success, grossing over $227 million worldwide. That same year, he acted in probably another one of his most memorable films in the 90s, Philadelphia. When it first was released, I wasn't a big fan of the film, but that's mostly because I was a kid and I wanted to see something lighter out of Hanks. But as I grew older, I understood much more how important the message presented in this film was. After all, it was one of the first mainstream Hollywood films to acknowledge HIV, homophobia, and homosexuals. Philadelphia tells the story of Andrew Beckett, played by Tom Hanks, who hides his homosexuality and HIV status, fearing that it would compromise his career status at a powerful Philadelphia law firm. But his secret is exposed when a colleague spots the illness's telltale lesions. Fired shortly afterwards, Beckett resolves to sue for discrimination, teaming up with Joe Miller, played by Denzel Washington, the only lawyer willing to help him. In court, they face one of his ex-employer's top litigators. For his role as Andrew Beckett, Hanks won the Academy Award for Best Actor at the 66 Academy Awards. Hanks followed Philadelphia with the 1994 hit Forrest Gump, which grossed a worldwide total of over $600 million at the box office. The film is based on a 1986 novel by Winston Groom. However, the film primarily focuses on the first 11 chapters of the novel, before skipping ahead to the end of the novel with the founding of Bubba Gump Shrimp Company and the meeting with Forrest Jr. In addition to skipping some parts of the novel, the film adds several aspects to Gump's life that do not occur in the novel, such as him needing leg braces as a child and his run across the United States. Forrest Gump tells the story of slow-witted Forrest Gump, played by Tom Hanks, who has never thought of himself as disadvantaged and thanks to his supportive mother, leads anything but a restricted life. Whether being a football star, fighting in Vietnam, or captaining a shrimp boat, Forrest inspires people with his childlike optimism. One recurring theme that keeps on popping throughout the film is the love that he has for Jenny, that has been next to him since his childhood but had a very troubled childhood herself. Forrest Gump is really the kind of film that takes its spectators on a journey through time and decades and gives some of the best lessons of life. Hanks won his second Best Actor Academy Award for his role in Forrest Gump, becoming only the second actor to have accomplished this feat of winning consecutive Best Actor Oscars. In 1995 and soon after in 1999, Hanks lent his voice to another classic, and this time it was for the character of Woody in the Disney CGI animated film Toy Story and its sequels. This was the first entirely computer animated feature film, as well as the first feature film from Pixar. Apart from its innovation in computer graphics, honestly the subject of toys and how special toys are to children and the fact that growing up is also part of the process of separating oneself from childhood is something that made this franchise, not just the first Toy Story, so relatable to both children and adults all over the world. In this installment of the series, we follow Woody, voiced by Tom Hanks, a good-hearted cowboy doll who belongs to a young boy named Andy, who sees his position as Andy's favorite toy jeopardized when his parents buy him a Buzz Lightyear action figure. Even worse, the arrogant Buzz thinks he's a real spaceman on a mission to return to his home planet. When Andy's family moves to a new house, Woody and Buzz must escape the clutches of maladjusted neighbor Sid and reunite with their boy. Toy Story had a large impact on the film industry with its innovative computer animations. After the film's debut, various industries were interested in the technology used for the film. Graphic chip makers desired to compute imagery similar to the film's animation for personal computers. Game developers wanted to learn how to replicate the animation for video games, and robotics researchers were interested in building artificial intelligence into their machines that compared to the film's lifelike characters. During that same period, Tom Hanks played in another notable film as an astronaut in Apollo 13, and even though technically it was an amazing film, the movie that really hit me hard during the late 90s was Steven Spielberg's directed movie Saving Private Ryan. This movie earned the praise and respect of the film community, critics, and the general public. It was labeled one of the finest war films ever made and earned Spielberg his second Academy Award for direction, and Hanks another Best Actor nomination. In casting the film, Spielberg sought to create a cast that looked the part, stating in an interview, "You know, the people in World War II actually looked different than people look today." Adding to this, and that he cast partly based on wanting the cast to match the faces I saw on the newsreels. As for Saving Private Ryan, it follows the story of Captain John Miller, played by Tom Hanks, who takes his men behind enemy lines to find Private James Ryan, whose 3 brothers have been killed in combat. Surrounded by the brutal realities of war while searching for Ryan, each man embarks upon a personal journey and discovers their own strength to triumph over an uncertain future with honor, decency, and courage. Since its release, Saving Private Ryan has been considered one of the greatest films of all time and has been lauded as influential on the war film genre. It is credited for renewing interest in World War II media. And if Tom Hanks hadn't done enough hits from the 80s throughout the 90s, he ended that decade by acting in the 1999 film based on the Stephen King novel The Green Mile. This movie is a fantasy drama film where Tom Hanks plays a death row corrections officer during the Great Depression who witnesses supernatural events that occur after an enigmatic inmate is brought to his facility. John Coffey is the new inmate who is a massive black man convicted of brutally killing a pair of young sisters. Even though he has the size and strength to kill anyone, he is lacking the demeanor to do anything bad. Beyond his simple naive nature and a deathly fear of the dark, Coffey seems to possess a prodigious supernatural gift. Because of this, Paul begins to question whether Coffey is truly guilty of murdering the two girls. The Green Mile was a commercial success, grossing $286 million from its $60 million budget. Strangely, I only watched this movie for the first time very recently. I think during its initial release it just didn't appeal to me as it wasn't your usual popcorn flick, but having seen it I can truly attest to the fact that this movie is really magic both in script but also the interesting visuals. Well, this concludes the first part of my two-part retrospective on Tom Hanks. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I know that I skipped through some other notoriously good Hanks movies, but in the spirit of keeping the video as concise as possible, I spoke about my favorite ones. With that being said, please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Let me know what your favorite Tom Hanks film is, and if there's a movie from the 80s and 90s from Hanks that I didn't speak about and you feel that I need to watch or give a second chance, well, just let me know. I'm always eager to learn and watch new things about him. Sometimes it's hard to see everything an actor has done, especially if they have so many credits. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.